Welcome to CP Newsroom. I'm Morgan Lee. 2014 is a big year for any sports fan. But unfortunately, in recent years, sex trafficking has been one of the things that's been written a lot as being correlated with the rise of these sporting events. To talk to me today about the correlation, I'm joined by Jimmy Lee, who's the Executive Director of Restore NYC, an organization that fights sex trafficking here in the city. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's good to be here.
It's good to have you. So I'm just wondering, first of all, like I said, we've seen a lot of stuff in the media that discusses the correlation between these massive sporting events that bring in thousands of people and obviously raise a lot of money, but also that they have maybe a darker side that maybe we want to acknowledge. Can you talk about what that correlation looks like?
Okay. Well, I think it may be safe to assume that at large sporting events or large events in general, conventions, there may be an increase in people buying sex. And when there's an increase in people buying sex because of the correlation between that and sex trafficking, which is basically people buying sex from women and girls and even boys who are not doing that voluntarily, we assume there could be an uptick in sex trafficking. But there is scant evidence and data to actually prove that point. So, I'm really thankful that there's more attention put on this issue, but I don't want to overemphasize the point that, the Super Bowl or another type of event is, an incredibly large sex trafficking event also.
When we're talking about the fact that there's scant research, is that more of a fact of researchers have not focused their research topics on looking between the correlation, or that the evidence that's out there really just doesn't point to anything firm?
I think it's both. I think, researchers haven't necessarily focused, but also the data coming from even law enforcement over the last couple Super Bowls doesn't prove that also. And again, I don't want to say that, it doesn't happen or there is not an increase, but I think as we work in fighting this, we really want to be driven by data and evidence.
Absolutely.
But again, it's just so important to note that whether there's a Super Bowl or not, this is happening in our own backyards. It's happening in every community, not only overseas in places like Thailand or India, but here in our own backyard in this great country.
Yeah, can you talk to us a little bit about that, what that looks like to you for specifically, since your organization works here in the city to fight sex trafficking in the city, which is different than some of these other groups that may look at it overseas. What's the picture like here?
Okay. Well, in New York, what we do is fairly straightforward. We find victims of sex trafficking and we help restore survivors so that they can know their identity, so they can transition to a healthy, independent life. What it looks like here is that there are thousands of foreign nationals that are brought to this great city every year and either forced or coerced into the sex trade. Now, we focus on foreign nationals, so mostly women from other countries brought here and forced into the sex trade. There's also a very large number and a larger number of domestically trafficked, mostly girls, but boys also. And these are overwhelmingly children from disadvantaged backgrounds, whether it's foster care or runaway teenagers or part of the juvenile justice system. The numbers are actually much greater for trafficked youth. But it happens right here in New York City, it happens in the suburbs, and in a place like New York that attracts so many immigrants, it really attracts sex trafficking of people from all over the world.
Sometimes I'd like to think of my own life and think of what the status quo of my own actions is. And one thing that I thought of recently that could be, done over the mass scale in New York City is that could perpetuate sex trafficking somehow is the fact that I don't know the people that I live around. And I live in a building where there's probably about 200 other people that live in that building as well. And I really don't know any of the other families personally that live there, or if someone's new or if someone's not new, and I think of all my friends who also tell me they don't know their neighbors as well. And that type of culture of anonymity may perpetuate that in some way.
Yeah, I think like a city, a metro area as big as New York, I think that is both attractive for many people, but also a way that traffickers can get away with it more easily. So we really feel like community and people in their communities who know their community and invest in their communities and look out for their communities, as well as kind of the social fabric of communities, is so important to really, prevent trafficking, but if it is going on your block, that you're able to do something about it in a productive way, which is usually calling authorities or service providers who can not only provide care, but make sure that justice is brought to traffickers.
Well, Jimmy, it's been great having you talk about some of this stuff, and I hope that sex trafficking is something that can stay on our radar regardless of what type of sporting event we're all talking about.
Well, thank you for allowing me to share with you today.
Absolutely. For CP Newsroom, I'm Morgan Lee. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.